Hello, friend. It is so good to see you and to be part of this journey. This is your show, Rediscover, a place where we find and hear a new word from the Lord. My name is Miguel Mendez, and I have the pleasure of serving on the pastoral staff at the Loma Linda University Church. And today I have a confession to make. I've picked up a new hobby, gardening. Now, there's something very pleasant about putting your hands in the ground and growing something new. The idea of transforming arid patches and seeing them germinate into lush gardens is something particularly appealing to me. The only problem is, as you might have guessed, gardening, like any other hobby, requires quite a bit of discipline. It requires somebody to mentor you, to teach you, if you will, the tricks of the trade. Now, I am lucky to have such a person like that in my life. My wife's grandmother lives with us. And because she lives with us, she has taken me under her wing. She possesses the greenest of all green thumbs. So one day I went up to her and I asked her, I said, Tell me how it is that you are able to revive any plant and any flower. She looked at me and paused for a moment. And at that point, I took pen and paper out. I was getting ready to write down this litany of instructions, this long list of rules that I had to follow. But instead she shared with me a piece of advice that is applicable not only to horticulture, but to life itself. She said, in order to transform something, you must love it first. Now think about the implications of that. Think about the implications as it pertains to someone's life, as it pertains to someone's experiences with the church, as it pertains to our mission. In order to transform something, you must love it first. And this is the way she takes wilted flowers and makes them beautiful again. She loves them. And one of the realities is when we are calling someone to change, we're asking them to do something difficult. We are asking them to leave their comfort zone behind, to leave that which they know, and to jump into something new. This is scary. And when somebody is asked to change, they are not actually upset about the change itself. They are mourning the loss. The loss of a life, the loss of comfort, the loss of these expectations that I know how to grapple with. People don't resist change. They mourn loss. And the only way in which we can get people to shift without being coercive is to first love them. In order to transform something, you must love it first. Maybe that's why Jesus, as he is desperately attempting to transform these ideas, these images, and these beliefs that the people around him have about who the Messiah ought to be, maybe that's why he gives them a story that encapsulates all the love that the Master has for us. Today we're going to be looking at one said story. It is found in Luke chapter 15. It is the first in a series of 3 stories that deal with loss and returning to the fold. We know this story well. But before Luke will tell it to us, we actually find a preamble, a little place in which Luke can construct for us the actual circumstances that Jesus is living in. If you have a Bible, open it with me right now to Luke chapter 15 and look right there at verse 1. The conflict at hand is the people that Jesus is actually eating with. Now notice that Luke gives us 2 particular groups of people that Jesus is experiencing community with. First, you have the tax collectors. Now, tax collectors were people that enacted Rome's will over the conquered nations. These tax collectors would collect either monies for Rome or for Herod. And the idea was that these people were in constant contact with Gentiles, therefore becoming ritually unclean. But more than that, they were a constant reminder, a symbol, if you will, of the Roman power over Israel. They were the ultimate oppressors, these signs of control and domination. They're a constant reminder of how Israel has failed. Sinners, on the other hand, well, scholars tell us that this particular word, sinners, has to do, at least in the mind of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, with people who were too poor to follow the law correctly. You see, the laws of the prophets and the way that they were expressed in the group of Sadducees and Pharisees had to do not with behavior or with observance of Mosaic canon, but rather with rituals. And if you were poor, you didn't have enough money to either construct a mikvah bath in your house, or to go on a pilgrimage, or to offer sacrifice, you were categorized as a sinner. So Jesus is talking with people that because of their current profession or their status in life have been exiled from the community. Now, right before the story begins, it is said that these Pharisees and Sadducees come to Jesus grumbling because of the company he keeps. And in response to their grumbling, Jesus tells them a story. He asks them to imagine, if they will, that they are shepherds. And it's interesting to note that these Pharisees and Sadducees are being asked to consider the plight of a shepherd. Now, to be sure, Pharisees and Sadducees had, for the most part, enormous herds, but they employed a lower rung of person in order to tend to them. These people knew nothing about what it meant to sleep in the wilderness, to walk through the desert, to lay your life down for a sheep. These people were too content living and dwelling in the temple, ensuring that they were ritually pure. The shepherds? Shepherds had no time for services. They professed a religion and a form of Judaism that, at least in the mind of the Pharisees, was heterodox at best. So it should make us chuckle that Jesus is asking them to consider the life of a shepherd. Nonetheless, Jesus asks them, and they do. He tells them this story. He says, which one among you, if you have 100 sheep and one gets lost, wouldn't leave the other 99 in the wilderness? Some other translations use the term open country, and go and find that one sheep. Now, I want to ask you to pause with me for a second and consider the implications of what Jesus is saying. As I just mentioned, Pharisees and Sadducees knew nothing about what it meant to be a shepherd. Pharisees and Sadducees knew that shepherds were simple tools, were commodities that could be traded. If one failed to keep a correct account of his herd, then there were a bunch of other people ready to take their place. Pharisees and Sadducees are asked to consider the cost-benefit analysis of sheep. And in the cost-benefit analysis of sheep, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to leave 99 in the wilderness, to risk 99 for one. But see, the glorious thing about the God that you and I serve is that He doesn't engage in cost-benefit analysis when it comes to people. People are what matters most to Jesus. So He says, who among you wouldn't leave the 99 in the wilderness? Now pause with me for a second. The word that Jesus uses to describe wilderness is the desert, the open country, the field. It is a perilous place. It is a place full of beasts and predators. It's a place where water is scant and shade far and few between. It is a place with jagged rocks and precipices. It is a place where a sheep can perish. Mind you, Pharisees and Sadducees didn't know the plight of shepherds, but they knew at least that sheep are not very bright. That without the rod of the shepherd, a sheep will eat itself to death and fall off a cliff. And now Jesus is talking about placing 99 of them in this perilous place full of precipices. Why? Well, because the parable functions for three particular groups of people, for three particular characters. First, you have the one who is lost. Now, it's pretty easy to know that you're lost. It's pretty easy to know that you have no hope. It's pretty easy to recognize that you're in trouble. Just last week, my son and I were at the pool. My 2-year-old, who is fearless, was looking around and trying to wrestle with his life vest. He doesn't like anything to constrain him. And so he was trying to loose the restraints of the life vest. He got out of the pool and finally was able to break free. And as I saw him, I knew what he was trying to do. My friend, you've seen the picture before. It's the child getting close to the edge, nervously, laughing, seeing if anyone will stop him. He did that a few times, and then without a warning, he ran back and began to race towards the pool. He jumped in there, fell in the water, and sunk. It took me but a few seconds to pull him out. But when I did, I could see it. His hand desperately reaching out. And when he felt my hand grasp his hands, he clung to it. As he came out of the water, he wrapped his legs around me and his hands around me. He didn't let go until we had safely taken him out of the pool. When you're lost, when you're in trouble, it's easy to know. So that's the first group. And that's the group that we typically think about when it comes to this story. It's the group that knows that they are in trouble. The paintings that we create and the stained glasses that adorn our churches are full of those pictures. The picture of the shepherd going down into the ravine and rescuing the sheep, pulling her, that little lamb, over his shoulders and walking majestically back to safety. It's easy to know when you're lost. But the reality is that the people who are lost, at least in Luke's gospel, are always the people who are most able to recognize who Jesus is. They are the people that will comprise Jesus' inner circle. They are the people that will hail him Messiah. They are the people that are eating and drinking with him. You can't be more lost in first century Judea than being a tax collector or a sinner. And yet they open their doors to Jesus. Make no mistake about it, the 3.5 years that Jesus spends on his earthly ministry are going down to the ravine and pulling the lost out and placing them gently on their shoulders. Now, why are people lost? Well, it strikes me that most of these lambs who have been lost are lost because they have these negative and false beliefs about who they are. The tax collector feels that he is unworthy because of his profession. The sinner believes that he is unworthy because of his social status, and Jesus tells them, you matter. You matter enough to me that I will sit and eat with you. But it is never the lost that are reticent to the gospel. The second character in the story is the relentless shepherd. The woman who will look tirelessly for that lost coin in our next story. Or the father who stands day after day waiting for the prodigal to return. This is the idea of a God who never ceases to look, who never ceases to fight, who never gives up on us, who will go to the ends of the world to rescue you. Doesn't that feel good? Even as you are lost, even as your life spirals out of control, to know that God at this moment is looking for you. To know that God at this moment is engaged in a rescue mission for you. To know that at this moment, even as you are drowning, God is reaching into the pool to pull you out. These groups, these two characters, they're obvious, even the simplest of superficial readings of the first story. So I want to linger with you for a moment on the third group, the 99. See, the 99 are problematic, aren't they? The 99 are in the wilderness, in every much the same peril as the one lost sheep. They're in a place that's dangerous, as we just said. The problem is they don't realize they're dangerous. They don't realize that their life is in danger. They don't realize that they too need the shepherd. In much the same way that the older son in the story that concludes this section of three tales doesn't realize that he too is separated from the Father. The Pharisees and the Sadducees represent those 99. The 99 who never leave but are still in a place that represents danger. Now think about what it would have felt like to be one of those 99. To be walking with the shepherd, to be fed by the shepherd, to be led by the shepherd, and then to hear the shepherd say, "You are okay, wait here. I'm leaving you in a perilous place because I need to look for that one who was lost." It's a difficult thing, isn't it? I can assure you there would be some grumbling among the sheep. There would be some questions as to why the shepherd is doing this. There would be some questions as to how much my life matters. It would be the same exact questions that the Pharisees and the Sadducees are asking of Jesus. But I want to pause with you for a second and to consider where they are left. The Bible says that they were left in the wilderness. And Luke has already made a habit of connecting us to those wilderness experiences. Luke chapter 4, Jesus is tempted in the wilderness. It is in the wilderness that Jesus defines his mission. It is in the wilderness that Jesus beats back Satan and surfaces as triumphant. It is in the wilderness that Jesus recognizes that he is king of this world. It is in the wilderness that Jesus refuses to bow down to political machinations and power plays. It is in the wilderness that Jesus recognizes that boulders can never be transformed into bread, for we are to be nourished by the Father. It is in the wilderness then that Jesus defines his mission. So could it be possible, that what Jesus is trying to tell the 99, that what Jesus is trying to tell these Pharisees and these Sadducees is, I am going to leave you in the wilderness in order for you to redefine your mission. I am leaving you in the wilderness in order for you to stop being sheep and to become shepherds. I am leaving you in the wilderness in order for you to imbue yourselves with the same passion that drives me to take care of the one who has been lost. I am leaving you in the wilderness to grow. Because throughout Scripture, my dear friend, wilderness is a dangerous place. It's a place of peril, but it also is a place for growth. It is a place where you experience ultimate dependence on God, and it is that experience that leads you to inhabit Canaan. The wilderness is a place for trial and tribulation. But out of trial and tribulation comes a renewed sense of mission. This has, I think, a definite impact for the way we do mission in our local congregations. You see, too often we look around and we look at the wilderness that is this world. Anxiety-riddled, we rush to the church in order to alleviate that panic. But see, the parish cannot alleviate our panic because we are constantly inward driven. We have our groups, our seasons of Bible study, our services, our potlucks, our social events. We transform our churches into places that will alleviate the guilt and the anxiety that I am feeling. And while I believe that there is a definite place for us to get the church as a resource for self-help, I also believe that the church ought to become more outwardly driven. Why do I believe that? Because that is the purpose in Luke's story of the lost sheep. It is to invite Pharisees and Sadducees to stop looking at their circle and consider the possibility that the world is bigger, that Jesus' mission to the world is grander, that there are people out there who are hurting. And that you cannot transform the world if you run away from the world. That in order to transform something, you must love it first. Too often, the church has been about the business of running away from the world, of creating these barriers between us and the world, of asking that age-old question that was asked in the patristic period. What does Jerusalem have to do with Athens? And the answer is everything. When the question is, what does the Seventh-day Adventist Church have to do with the inner city? Or what does Loma Linda have to do with San Bernardino in my own geographical location? The answer to that question is everything. Because we are living in this wilderness period. But we haven't been abandoned by the shepherd. We have been given an opportunity to become like the shepherd. To forge a love for the world that is born out of trial and tribulation, and to say, I know what it is like to be lost. And the lyrics to that, my most favorite of all Christian hymns, pull us in that direction, don't they? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And once we're found, returned to the fold. And we live in the wilderness. And we wish, we desire that the shepherd stay with us, but the shepherd goes out again. Because there's always one more. There's always one more sheep that needs rescuing. The parable has theological implications. It tells us about who God is. The parable has ecclesiological implications. It tells us how the church ought to view those who are lost. The parable has anthropological implications. It tells us about ourselves. But the parable, most of all, has missiological interpretations. For it causes us to ask a question. It's a question about our resources, our programs, our plans, our ideas. It is a question that asks, where is our mission going? As the body of Christ, are we bold enough to drive outward? Or are we gripped by fear and riddled with anxiety, going to continue to move inward? There was a story. It's a powerful story that I read. It's a story that I read about a man. The man lived his life in the slums of Rio, one of the most dangerous cities in South America. Rio de Janeiro has the highest murder per capita in Latin America. Slum towns known as favelas dot the landscape. These are ruled by gangs. These places are so far removed from the safety and security of civilization that police don't really go in there. But there was a man. Fabio grew up in Rio. And Fabio made it his mission in life to rescue people out of that cycle of violence. Through care, through education, through companionship, through providing health and a loving ear to those who had been forgotten by the system. When I read the story, my heart broke a bit. But that cynicism that is part and parcel of being human also crept in. I'm glad the reporter asked the question of Fabio. She said, "Why do you do this? Is it making a difference? After all, you've been assaulted, you've been beaten, you've been abused, you've been robbed, your family's been threatened. When is it going to be enough?" And Fabio, I can only picture him looking up and saying, "It'll be enough when I get one more. One more. One more. That's all I need is one more." We serve a greedy God who is out there trying to get just one more. May God continue to bless you, whether you are lost, whether you have been found, or whether you are growing in the wilderness.